Welcome back to the channel, team. It's been a couple of weeks since we did our last video, but I thought I'd kick this off more so as a bit of a prep update. I haven't really done one. I've had a few people ask me about like a prep vlog or prep series, if we were doing one at all, because we did one for last prep. But this one's been a little bit different. We've been busy, life's been crazy, and we've got lots of shows that we're prepping for, so it's kind of been head down doing the work. But I'm not going to use that as an excuse not to do content, because I actually love doing content. I love sharing the process. I think it's really valuable for a lot of people who do want to compete or, have the inclination to want to compete at some stage. So for me, if I can share that journey throughout this whole process, I think it's a really positive thing. So to give you guys some context, I'm not going to tell you which show I'm doing yet, because we have to do a state qualifying show first. It's going to be a mystery. I'll leave that up to you guys to figure out when we do it. But we do have the Nationals, which is the pro qualifier, the last weekend in April, so I believe it's the 26th or 27th that weekend. So we're still about, I think, like 13 weeks out from that show. So still a little while away, but in terms of where we are physique-wise, I might chuck a video up in this video somewhere. We'll do some posing at the end and show you guys how we're looking. But body weight this morning, 97.5 AM fasted. My stage cap is 88, or my weigh-in for my height class is 88, so we still got about, well, realistically like 9.5 kilos to go. In terms of actual fat loss progression that we've timelined, it's probably about, I'm gonna say another 5 kilos or 6 kilos of fat loss. And then it's gonna be some probably less fun stuff to do to make weight. So like sodium loading depletion, water loading depletion, food pull, probably change some of our supplements that we're using at the moment, just to kind of, drop off a lot of water, a lot of inflammation, and really just get us in shape and get on stage at the weight we need to be. So I'm kicking off today's workout. It's a full upper body push. So starting off with chest isolation, just one working set, cable chest flies, but we'll jump in and show you guys how that one looks. So just a couple of things, like with the cable chest fly starting off, just one working set to kick off this chest or push session. Chest isolation first. So I think this is an important point to bring up for anyone who maybe wants to bring up a specific muscle group. It's really dissecting the way that they train and really doing things deliberately. So when we look at the chest, it probably makes sense to do chest stuff first in your push workout, right? If you're trying to grow your chest. And more specifically, I think a chest isolation is a really great idea at the start of that workout. Because when we move into our primary pressing movements, we do get a lot of contribution from front delts, from triceps, and obviously pecs as well. That's the main muscle we're trying to train. But when we isolate the pecs first, we really direct a lot of stimulus to that muscle group, so that when we come onto our presses later on, obviously we're still getting the you know, the assistance of all those other muscle groups, but we're still training the chest. The chest ends up being the limiting factor. So it's the thing that's, you know, receiving the most stimulus in that session. It may limit load in the later pressing movements, but if we look at it logically, load is largely irrelevant. Again, I can't stress this point enough, is like when we're looking at the current literature of hypertrophy, muscle growth occurs on a rep continuum of like 5 to 30. So it's really irrelevant what load you use as long as the muscle that you're training is being trained sufficiently. And that means through a full range of motion, you know, controlled eccentric or controlled just movement in general, a nice contraction. And I think that's really what matters most. It's really largely irrelevant how heavy you are pressing when it gets to the pressing movements, so long as you're progressing in some fashion. So it just means that, you know, each week you're doing more reps, doing more load, or potentially a combination of both. And then I think this comes down to exercise selection as well. If we start thinking about how we structure these sessions, when we look at like the strength profile of a muscle group, or any muscle group in particular, you are going to fatigue the quickest in that shortened position. So if you think about like chest pressing, for example, you're always going to fail at the top, so you're going to struggle to lock out. So if we bias movements at the start of the session, i.e. a cable fly, where you do get a big nasty stretch, but also the contraction or the shortened position is the thing that's biased most in that movement. So we want to prioritize that first, get it out of the way, and then we've still got lots of like room left in the tank for the chest, or a lot of, you know, ability to produce force more in that lengthened and mid position. So we can move on to things that do load that lengthened and mid position more, like a press, variation of some description, machine, dumbbell, Smith, whatever you have access to. And then even more specifically, if you did have access to, say, a prime machine or any loaded, machines that you can load with like variable resistance profiles, you could just bias more in that sort of mid to lengthened position to allow you to continue progressing in that chest session without fatigue accumulating too quickly.
11, here we go for 12. Good girl, let's bring it up. All right, well done. Yep, yep. Okay, good. Yeah, and you're gaining strength, which is good. That's what we looked at. Obviously, we don't want to gain, you know, get to a point where we feel like that's a good point for you. Obviously,
All right, so moving on to exercise 2. As I mentioned, we had the more shortened position with the cable fly first, chest isolation. Now we're moving on to our compound movement, incline machine chest press. Obviously, different machines will vary in their resistance profiles, and to some degree, how well they translate to providing stimulus to the target tissue. But they're all pretty similar, and I think people get hung up on like what type of machine they should use, or having the best machines, or whatever it might be. When in reality, it doesn't really matter. As long as it does the job, it trains in the pattern you're trying to train, trains the muscles you're trying to train. And then if you're lucky enough to have a cool gym like this one, where it does really load that lengthened position, this machine does converge at the top, so it does give you a little bit more squeeze at the top. But I think in most cases, it doesn't really matter too much. Where if we look at like those normal hammer strength machines, for example, they kind of do the opposite. They unload at the bottom where you want the tension. They load up really hard at the top. But does that really make a difference in terms of your long-term progression? No, not really. I think the smartest thing you can do is whatever machines you have access to, use them, progress them in some fashion, either adding reps, adding load, doing more volume, whatever you need to do to progress. But I think the biggest thing you could do, and the biggest takeaway I could hopefully give to everyone, is standardize your range of motion so that all of your reps look the same and that you are not changing your technique in order to progress. But as well, I think using dead stops is a really beneficial tool. So for this one, you would have seen I'm dead stopping at the bottom of every rep to standardize my form so that when I get close to fail, it's not because I can't do any more reps and I just use bullshit technique to do more reps. It's literally I can no longer stay within that standardized range, i.e. stop at the bottom, fully lock out. I'm done. I'm not going to try any more reps because those reps are no longer stimulative for the tissue that I'm trying to train because I can't do the technique. So I'm relying on either a change in range of motion or a change in technique to get more reps, which just accumulates a disproportionate amount of fatigue compared to the stimulus that I'm trying to target. Should be okay. There we go. Ooh. All right, so exercise number 3, incline dumbbell press. Oh, that was heavy. So I had to take a little progression this week. Had 50 kilos last week for 2 sets of 12. There was no 52 kilo dumbbells here, so I had to go 55, so pretty big jump up. All that meant is that my reps come down. So I think this is a point to bring up with a lot of people is you don't always have to lift heavier. You can do more reps, or if you do lift heavier, you can do less reps and then just chase progression that way. So instead of next week me just defaulting to go heavier, my rep target is 8 to 12. I hit the bottom end this week, 8 reps with a new load. It means my total volume might decrease slightly. But all I do next week is I'll just try and get more reps. So if I get 2 sets of 8 today, for example, at 55, next week I'll try and go 2 by 9, 2 by 10, 2 by 11, 2 by 12. Once I hit that top end of the rep bracket, then I'll simply just increase the load and go again. So it's a way of just having long-term progression at the forefront of my training. But I guess a point to bring up on that as well, and I've raised this point a lot, around proximity to failure, how hard you should train. And what we know, specifically with like highly skill-based movements like heavy presses, for example, is there is less benefit the closer you get to failure because the risk outweighs the reward. So we know that the net stimulus gained from 0 RIR or failure training versus like 2 to 3 RIR is pretty damn similar. The only thing that differs is the fact that there's a disproportionate rise in fatigue the closer you get to failure. So when we're using heavy compound multi-joint movements, the risk is almost not worth it in the sense that if I did a 0 RIR or fail set, I'm not gaining any extra stimulus, but I'm just greatly increasing the risk of injury and potentially stunting my progression in future sessions because I've already tapped out that load for that rep target. So I can't do any more if I've gone to fail. So if I leave 1 or 2 in the tank, it does leave me room to progress either load or reps week to week. And it also limits my exposure to injury risk in the long run, which is especially important during contest prep. And I think from a fatigue management standpoint, makes the most sense because it's the exercise that's gonna fuck me up the most, because it's the heaviest, it's the hardest, it's a loaded sort of stretch, a lengthened position biased exercise. So if I can avoid doing things that are gonna detract from my long-term progression, I will always opt for that. And I think most people should live by that notion as well and train in the same fashion. I got it.
Yep.
Oh. Yeah, that was nice actually. All right, so on to our last exercise for pecs. So we started with the cable fly 1 set. We had 2 working sets on the incline dumbbell press. We had 2 working sets on the machine chest press, and then 1 set to fail on dips. So a total of 6 sets for chest, and I'm absolutely cooked. So again, like if we're talking about evidence-based approach to training, 6 to like 10 working sets per muscle group per week seems to be about the sweet spot. So we're right in that threshold. And I think it's really a matter of like quality over quantity. So I've got to hit chest again in like 4 days. I'll do another probably 5 to 7 sets, I believe, in my next workout. So again, across the week, it's not a lot of volume, but it's really directed stimulus, and it's really high quality. So all my reps are perfect, my technique, execution is on point, and I'm progressing in some manner each week, either lifting more load or doing more reps. So again, that needs to be the priority of your training. When it comes to exercise selection, across the week, we don't want any more than like 3 to 5 exercises, because again, we want quality over quantity. We want something that maybe trains more of the flat position, more of an incline position, and potentially more of a decline position. So in this workout, it's been more incline biased, and then we've got 1 exercise more in that decline position. Dips being a great example of that, allows us a really full range of motion, but we do get a lot of carryover into the triceps, into the delts as well, which is certainly not a bad thing if you're trying to build muscle. I think it's a really advantageous thing to train more stuff and progress that stuff more frequently, because you're going to recruit more muscle mass and arguably build more muscle in the long run. But that's it, last set, dips to fail, show you how it looks. So one thing with the dips, they're a fantastic compound exercise that you can use to target a lot of muscles. You can obviously bias different muscles by changing your position or changing the way you set up or execute how you do the movement. So we're using this one specifically to be more like chest biased. So you'll notice when I set this up, I set the handles out a little bit wider, sort of just outside shoulder width. So I can have my arm path a little bit wider. I can get a deeper stretch at the bottom on the pecs, which is obviously going to direct more stimulus to the pecs. A little bit to the anterior delts, a little bit to the triceps, obviously at the lockout in that shortened position. But if we wanted to make it more tricep biased, so if you were doing more tricep dips, you could bring those handles in nice and close. You could change your arm path to be closer to the torso, get a bigger stretch in the triceps, and arguably not have to stretch down as far in the pecs, and really bias a lot more of that tricep, the same as you would normally for like a close grip press. It'd be a very similar arm path, tucked in nice and close, emphasizing a big stretch in the triceps, but also it's really gonna emphasize that lockout position with finishing that movement. Yeah. Nah, that's light.